Good morning and welcome to The Point. This week here in this studio, we had our second major debate of this election cycle. Back in May, the Republican candidates for governor were here. This week, the Democratic candidates took their turn at answering questions about what they would do if they got their party's nomination and then were elected in November. Former Senator Gretchen Whitmer, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, and Sri Thanadar, a PhD and entrepreneur, were all here to talk about those issues that will impact us going forward. Of course, roads in Michigan are always very topical. We also talked about reforming auto no-fault insurance, but we started our questioning with the subject that on Wednesday, the day the debate took place, was very topical indeed. That was the day that the president had reversed course on separating children from their parents at the border. So we started with a question about immigration. Immigration in the United States is and has been a hot button issue for some time. It has certainly been exacerbated by images of children being separated from their parents at the borders in recent weeks. The president promised an executive order and in fact signed one to partially and temporarily deal with that current situation today. And while it's true, the vast majority of law governing immigration is federal, what happens to people who are in our state without documentation is more of a local issue. In the case of such individuals, my question is, do you support ideas like sanctuary cities or other measures for people who are in those circumstances? Mr. Thanadar, you're first.
Well, what's happening in the southern border is not only inhumane, but it's very unfair and it's very un-American. Separating children from their families. I see no good in happening something like that. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country with dreams, wanting to achieve my American dream, and many immigrants do come to us. And one of the reasons we are such a great country is because how welcoming we are to immigrants. I would have an immigrant-friendly policy. We need to encourage immigration, legal immigration. Those, like someone, look at me. I came to this country and I created hundreds and thousands of jobs only because this country allows me the opportunity to get my PhD and work on my businesses.
Senator Whitmer.
I don't know anyone who looks at the coverage of what's happening under the Trump administration with regard to ripping children away from their families. It is heartbreaking, it is gut-wrenching, and it is sacrificing our moral authority in the world as well as our American democratic values. We know that children have been taken from their parents and brought some here to Grand Rapids, where they are being placed in foster homes as young as 8 months old, and they don't know where their parents are. It is the worst of what we've seen come out of the Trump administration. And you know what? A governor has a role. While immigration is federal policy, a governor has an important role. There are a lot of different levers of power in the executive office, but the most important in times like these is the bully pulpit. The ability to pull back the Michigan National Guard and say, we are not participating in what you are producing out of Washington, D.C. The ability to sue the federal government on behalf of the children who are being separated. We have a duty to use that bully pulpit, and I would.
Dr. El-Sayed.
I've never met an immigrant who didn't come to this country believing that this could be a place that they could build opportunities for themselves and their kids. And when parents are coming here, pursuing the American dream, we're watching as the Trump administration is tearing them apart. We've got a responsibility to act. Just today, we announced that we believe that the governor should decide that he will not allow Coast Guard at the southern border, that he will work with the Department of Health and Human Services to make sure that we are placing those children who have come here from that border, doing everything we can to bring them back to their families. And then lastly, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we are not part of a broken federal immigration process. And that's why under my leadership, I have said that we will not participate with ICE, not in our police, not in our penitentiaries. We will not allow them to leverage our state resources to enforce what is ultimately a broken and heartless immigration setting.
Candidates, thank you. Everywhere you drive in the state of Michigan, you see orange barrels that signify that work is being done on the roads. However, each of you and millions of your fellow Michiganders have expressed concern that the work on those roads is not moving along quickly enough. So if you could, tell me how much money you think it would take to get our roads in this state in what you would think is an acceptable shape? And where does that money come from? Starting with you, Senator.
Well, let's be honest. It doesn't matter what we think. We have science to tell us how much it's going to take to fix our roads. We've had a failure of leadership on infrastructure in Michigan, and we are now paying to fix our cars instead of the state paying to fix their roads. The average driver in our state is shelling out hundreds of dollars a year to fix tires or windshields like I have traversing our state. You know, it is time to get serious about fixing these fundamentals. These are the costs that are setting families behind. So I've put a real infrastructure plan on the table. It would be funded through the Rebuild Michigan Infrastructure Bank to assure taxpayers that every dollar that is supposed to be going toward infrastructure actually gets there. It's about building roads smarter and using good mix and materials so that they are built to last. But it's also about tearing up a road and using that as an opportunity to replace the lead infrastructure that delivers the water to our homes, laying the conduit to get us connected to broadband, and working with our partners in the private sector to upgrade our electrical grid.
Dr. El-Sayed.
We all know that our roads are crumbling, and the science tells us that we are fundamentally failing to invest. But it's not just about investing more, it's also about how we invest. And we need to think smart about how we do that. We've proposed a pure Michigan infrastructure bank. And what that infrastructure bank would allow us to do is invest more thoughtfully, and to do so over a longer period of time that allows us to bypass a lot of the politics that get in the way. But let's be clear. Infrastructure is not just about roads and bridges. It's also about water. Flint still doesn't have clean water that they can trust. And that is an infrastructure issue. We can leverage this bank to get the leaded piping out of the ground once and for all. It's also about schools. I inspected city schools and saw mold growing underneath the gym floor. You could smell it when you walked into the class. And we've got to make sure that we are investing in those school buildings, the places where we concentrate almost vulnerable most of the day, most of the year. But it's also about renewable energy. And we have the opportunity to be a leader in breaking the dependence on a system of energy that will ultimately poison us by investing in renewable energy infrastructure.
Mr. Tanada.
Twice now, my car broke down when I was on my way to a debate. Last time I was at King High School. Today I had to borrow my wife's car so I can come to Grand Rapids and attend this debate. This is becoming a problem. Michiganders are spending, what, $2.5 billion a year spending on their cars. We got to fix the roads. We got to fix our infrastructure. I am proposing a $30 billion, 30-year municipal statewide bond to pay for our infrastructure. We need to put about $4 billion taking care of the lead pipes. We need to take care of the bridges that are falling apart. We need to have mass transportation. People need to be able to drive all across and go. The bus routes need to be increased. We need to have light rail. We need to take Michigan to the next level.
Dr. El-Sayed, for our next question, we'll go to you first, and it's related to driving and roads. On Monday, I got a bill for a half a year of my auto no-fault insurance on my vehicle. It's risen steadily over the past few years and has now become a major line item in our personal household income. Still, I'm lucky because it is half or less than half of what some of our fellow citizens are paying on the east side of the state. How do you fix no fault, and will you have to do away with the unlimited catastrophic benefits in order to control cost?
Rick, you're like many Michiganders, because in Michigan we pay 82% more in auto insurance than the national average. And if you live in a community like Detroit, you're paying 50% more than that. And that's because we've allowed the auto insurance corporations, the trial lawyers, the hospitals to get away charging us way too much in a system that is asking auto insurance to be health insurance too. We introduced our Reverse the Rates plan. Reverse the Rates does three things. Number one, it creates a Truth in Insurance Commission, allows people like you and me to be in a position to hold the auto insurers accountable. It also pushes forward an anti-redlining bill. Anti-redlining right now is so important because we've got folks in communities who are being charged more simply for where they live, what their education status is, what their credit score is, and it's wrong. And then lastly, we've got to pass universal single-payer health care for everybody. We've launched our program, MichiCare, and it would provide every Michigander access to health care. If everybody has health insurance, then we can stop asking auto insurance to be health insurance too. This is a civil rights issue. We've got to act, and we need leadership who's committed to doing it.
Mr. Tanada, the question.
Well, we call ourselves the auto capital of the world, but we make owning automobiles much more difficult. Many of the residents are paying high auto insurance rates. Their auto insurance rates are higher than their car payment. We need to ensure that insurance companies cannot use non-driving factors in coming up with insurance rates. Non-driving factors like credit scores or redlining where you live. These factors you need to not be able to use. We need better transparency at MCCA. I understand that MCCA has over $9 billion in their coffers, and yet they raised our auto insurance rates from 172 to 192. We need more transparency. We need to solve this problem for every Michigander.
Senator Whitman.
Well, there's no question that the cost of insurance in Michigan is crippling families' ability to pay their rent, to buy groceries, to put food on the table, to take care of themselves, and our ability to lure talent into Michigan and business investment into Michigan. I am absolutely committed in the first 100 days of my administration to sign a bill into law that brings the cost down. But we have to remember, no fault was created to reduce litigation and to ensure that people that are tragically injured in an auto accident get the coverage they need and the care they need for the rest of their lives. So, as we bring stakeholders to the table to put real solutions to bringing cost containment, that insist on timely payment by insurance companies, that create a fraud authority so that we eliminate any fraud in the system that's contributing to the high cost, and demand transparency in the catastrophic claims fund, as well as eliminating redlining. Your rates should not be decided based on your credit rating.
For all three of these candidates, this was likely the largest audience that they'd had for a debate so far. Not only did we carry it here on 24-Hour News 8 and Wood TV, but it was carried in several other markets, including Marquette, Cadillac, Traverse City, in Flint, and in Lansing. And when we come back, more of our questioning for the Democratic candidates for governor. To the point. Welcome back to the Point. This past week, a debate with Democratic candidates for governor unveiled what they might do if they were successful in winning the nomination and then winning in November. We talked to them about a number of subjects that are important to you and to the state. We talked about health care, we talked about school safety, and we also talked about the politics of the primary. That's what we focus on in this segment. We have seen dramatic evidence around the country of how vulnerable our public facilities, including schools, are to acts of violence, and many of those tragedies have involved guns. So what should we do to secure our schools in Michigan and other areas? And what, if any, additional laws governing firearms should the state consider? We start with you, Senator Whitman.
Well, thank you. This is a question that I think is incredibly close to my heart as a parent with kids in the public schools. I've got two daughters. They're here tonight. They're 14 and 16. I have to talk to my daughters about when they get into class to always be assessing what is the quickest way to escape that room if there is an active shooter situation. Our kids are scared to death, and no one in Lansing is doing anything about it. That's going to change. It is time for us to have extreme protection order legislation passed immediately. Waiting periods, real background checks, keeping guns out of the hands of people with domestic violence backgrounds. And yes, we need to ban bump stocks. And I've been on record for a long time about assault weapons, which I don't believe we should be selling in this country. But here's the thing, I want to get things done. I am so tired of people who want to go off to their partisan corners and just shoot arrows at one another. We have to solve this for my kids and every kid in the state, for the teachers in our school buildings, and the parents who want to drop their kids off and know they're going to come home safe.
Dr. El-Sayed.
I've got a 6-month-old baby girl at home, and I can't imagine what it would feel like to watch TV and see kids strewing out of her schools and be asking myself, is she safe? We've got to stand up for a Michigan where that is not going to happen anymore. I'll be honest, I was in 8th grade when Columbine happened. And had my generation had the kind of courage that young people are showing right now, maybe we wouldn't be in this circumstance. It's time for us to stand with our young people and demand real gun reform right now. What does that mean? That means that, number one, we've got to stand up and finally just say it, we've got to ban assault weapons. Number two, it means that we've got to have much tighter background checks, and we need to make sure that if somebody has been credibly alleged to commit domestic violence, that they are included in the people who are not responsible to own a gun. And we need to empower law enforcement in those circumstances when somebody shows themselves to be irresponsible, that law enforcement can go in and take that gun away. It also means that we need to stand up and say that this is not about mental illness, because the vast majority of people who suffer mental illness will never be in a circumstance. This is about gun reform.
Mr. Tanada.
As I travel across Michigan, I met and talked with many teachers. It's so important that our children are able to get good quality education in safety, and our teachers are able to be safe when they do that. I want to ensure that there should be absolutely no guns in education institutions, and that includes giving no guns in teachers' hands. Teachers are there to teach, not to protect. We need to put enough money into our schools so that we can have key card access, we can have metal detectors, we can have cameras, we can have security guards. We need to have a public education system that's safe for all of our children.
Last month, when your Republican counterparts were here, I asked them about the Trump effect and how that would impact their primary, and I want to ask you this question. In a state where Bernie Sanders narrowly won the primary for president in 2016, and where Hillary Clinton lost the general election for the first time in 30 years for Democrats here in the state of Michigan, does that have an impact on this race? In other words, is there a battle for the ideological part of the party that plays into your primary race? Doctor, I start with you.
Look, people are done with the old system of politics, the system where we have politicians who kowtow to these big corporations for these big, fat, unlimited corporate checks and then spend them on TV. That's not the kind of campaign we're running. I won't take a dime of corporate money. We have not. Our campaign is about bringing people together to talk about the issues that matter, to inspire a way forward for our politics. That's what politics was always supposed to be about. And so when we look at what Bernie Sanders was able to do, he was able to show us a way forward that didn't force us to take money from the corporations, didn't force us into a position where we've got to sell our soul so that they buy off our policy. And in this race, I am the only candidate here who has fully complied with federal financial disclosures. I'm not taking a dime of corporate money. We are knocking on 10,000 doors a week, and we are having conversations with voters about real policy. Because I'm not bought off by the folks like Blue Cross Blue Shield. I can say single-payer health care. I'm not bought off by the auto insurance companies. I'll talk about insurance reform. It's about what Michiganders deserve in their politics.
Mr. Tanada.
Well, I am the only gubernatorial candidate that voted for Bernie Sanders. I went and visited with Bernie when he was in Iowa presidential campaign in 2016. The issue about corporate money and the influence of billionaires and corporate money onto our politician is staggering. I have taken a pledge not to accept a single penny from corporate special PACs. I have seen what happens. We in Lansing, we have a pay-for-play culture where basically the way it works is politicians need a lot of money to run their election campaigns. They get that money from lobbyists, and they get that money from corporations and special interests. And basically corporations get a payback when they get elected. I will clean up Lansing and stop that pay-for-play culture.
Senator?
So one of the things that I have done is travel to all 83 counties as a candidate for governor. And everywhere I go, I have conversations with people about the future of our state, about putting together a plan that really meets people's needs. I've met people who've seen a doctor for the first time because of Medicaid expansion. In 2013, when Governor Snyder, a man on the other side of the aisle with whom I disagreed often, embraced the Affordable Care Act, I didn't just go off to my partisan corner and cross my arms. I didn't come up with a list of demands. I just went to work because I knew that even though his party controlled the House and the Senate, he wasn't going to be able to get it done without my help. We delivered health care to 680,000 people in our state. As I get around Michigan, the Trump effect tells me this, that people are scared to death that the Republicans are going to continue to take away health care. Whether it's through work requirements or attacks from the federal level, I will stand resolute and fight back. And I think the Trump effect means more people are getting engaged, and I'm so energized by that.
Medicaid expansion here in the state of Michigan, again, that was a hot discussion. There were a lot of folks who had a hard time getting on board with that. But some of you have gone further to universal health care. And we have a question from one of our viewers. And to the degree that you support universal health care, and I'll ask each of you to explain where you are on that. Jake from Novi asked, if indeed you do support that, how do you plan to implement single-payer health care?
Well, you know, health care, like education, is not a privilege. Health care is a fundamental human right, and it is important that we cover as many people under the health care as possible. I do support Bernie Sanders' Medicare expansion proposal nationally. This needs to be done at the national level. If it cannot be done, I would do that at a state level. I do support single-payer health care. We need to, if you look at the trillions of dollars that we spend on health care, 20% of that money is really taken up by the insurance companies. And under the single payer, it would actually be cheaper to cover people because as a single payer, we'll be able to negotiate better pricing. Prescription medicine costs in America are the highest in the world. Our seniors are fighting whether to pay for prescription medicine or food. We need to fix this.
Senator?
Well, I just told you in the last question that when Governor Snyder embraced Medicaid expansion, I went to work and I partnered with him and we delivered. And so I'm the only person on this stage that's actually delivered on providing health care for people. Yes, we still have 600,000 people in our state that we need to expand coverage to, and I am absolutely committed to that. Here's the thing that sets me apart. I know how to get things done. You know, this is a critical election. We've experimented with outsiders, and we've seen a city pay a price where they can't drink their water and have been paid the worst kind of price for government failure. It is critical after this election, we get to work. We make our agenda a reality. We agree on a lot of things up here. Getting people covered, every person covered, is a part of all of our agendas. Bringing down prescription drugs, making sure that everyone who has a pre-existing condition is covered as well. These are things that are at the center of my health care plan, and I'm going to make it a reality, and I know how to get it done.
Dr. El-Sayed.
We don't agree on everything. You asked a very specific question, Jake, about how we implement single-payer health care in the state. I'm a doctor. I actually was responsible for the health of 670,000 Michiganders in the city of Detroit, and I know that we can get it done. We've proposed a plan called MichiCare. This program would cut 10% off the costs of healthcare immediately. It would do away with things like copays and deductibles and premiums. No more in-network, out-of-network. How we pay for it? Well, a progressive income tax comes out of the payroll, and we ask companies to stand up and say, well, you're going to pay a gross receipts tax over $2 million. That means that 75% of businesses are going to pay a dime. It saves us money on health care, provides every Michigander access to the health care that they deserve. Now, let me tell you why I can say this. I don't take money from corporations. I haven't had a fundraiser thrown for me by Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I will not, because to speak the truth, you cannot be taking money from the same corporations who bought and sold our politics for far too long.
That's just part of what we talked about with the Democratic candidates for governor. As I pointed out at the top of the show, we've also talked to the Republicans in a very similar forum when we interviewed them during our debate in May. We, of course, as your local election headquarters, will continue to follow this race through the August primary and all the way through November. We'll talk more about that when we come back. To the point. The race for governor in the state of Michigan this year is big. Not that it isn't every 4 years, but there'll be a wholesale change of faces in Lansing. Leadership will be at a premium. That's why we'll continue to follow these races. And by the way, if you missed either the Democratic debate or the Republican debate, you can see them both. They're at woodtv.com. And every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock and throughout the week, stay with us because we'll have your local election headquarters covered.